Our guest today is Diana Gibson. Diana, welcome to Elevating Performance.
Thank you, Mark. I'm excited to be with you today.
Diana, you've been in startups, you've been in the middle market, you've held leadership positions at Fortune 500s, and in the latter part of your career, you really had a distinguished run as a vice president at Microsoft. So you've really seen the whole spectrum. When organizations are scaling, how do they look at adding new capabilities, be that product or services, to their overall mix? What's in their mindset when they undertake something like that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Mark. We looked at it from a few different perspectives. When you're building out new capabilities, you can either be acquiring, right? So, at Microsoft, we did a lot of acquisitions, mostly product acquisitions, but many times those product acquisitions had a consulting services organization, a support organization, et cetera. And so we would look at, integrating those capabilities into the broader ecosystem. Or sometimes we would build our own capabilities. So if you think about when we first started moving things to the cloud, we had to build out an Office 365 capability from both consulting, support, and customer success. Similarly with Azure. And then the third direction I would talk about is partnering. So many times, you're going to choose to actually leverage a partner to do some of those capabilities because it does not make sense to do it internally. It makes more sense to partner because someone else has greater skills, and it would take you too much time or too much money, et cetera, to build out those skills internally. So the reward isn't there.
You mentioned what the reward was, specifically on the partnering track. What are some of the risks when they partner with another services organization or a novel technology?
Not just when you partner with somebody, but across all three dimensions. The risk is always how well you're going to service the customer, right? If you're acquiring a company, that there's no downtime, there's no blips in the radar, so to speak, of how you're integrating within the bigger organization to deliver the customer outcomes. And if you're building it internally, you have similar issues. You need to make sure you're building the right skills, that you're incubating things appropriately, and figuring out when you need to scale, which is aligned with your sales strategies. And then if you're partnering, you need to make sure that whoever you're leveraging as a partner has the requisite skills and the same approach to how they deliver to customers high value outcomes. You need to make sure that they're established and able to do that.
Excellent. How about, as far as the playbook is concerned, are there things that you've seen play out that absolutely fail?
Yeah, so I think lessons learned again across each of those dimensions is really looking, if you're acquiring, looking at how you're integrating and planning to integrate the people and the people skills into the broader organization and when to do that. So you're going to incubate them for a while, and then at some point you have to mainstream them into the broader ecosystem. And you need to make sure that you have buy-in from all levels of leadership to make sure that happens appropriately, because otherwise you may have this friction on who's doing what and why they're doing it and why do we need these people and why do we need these skills. So you need to make sure that you've done the appropriate integration planning and landing and change management that goes along with that. Similarly, if you're building out new capabilities, what are those capabilities that we need to build? Are they technical, and what goes along with those technical skills? Because I've always felt you can teach people technical skills. Inherently, not everyone has customer facing skills. So you need to think about how do you build not just the technical skills, but the delivery aspect of how you're going to work with the customer and deliver their outcomes that they're looking for, which of course also has change management involved with it. And then with a partner, it's the same. And I have seen things fail when you don't do that properly, whether it's, within your own company or when you're working with a customer. And I've seen you lose a lot of good talent if you don't do that appropriately as well, because they won't feel like they're part of the bigger organization and they'll leave. And I've seen that both in services as well as in sales.
When you look back and reflect on these things, the not invented here mantra, had you seen that on a regular basis in different endeavors?
I've seen that, across my career. As you said, I've been in a lot of different types of companies, and I had the opportunity to be an acquiree. So I was acquired with Groove Networks coming into Microsoft. So I lived through it. And I probably had all the same concerns that other acquisition teams have coming into a large company like Microsoft. I think how you do that is super important because you need to make people feel comfortable. You need to make them feel valued. You need to make sure that you're continuing to look after, what am I going to do to make sure these people are successful? And by the way, when you build out new capabilities that are specific to the Microsoft stack, you have to do the same thing, right?
Diane, I believe at one time you were responsible for 9 different Microsoft business units. It's through that lens that I caught in our last chapter when you were speaking about the importance of change management, specifically on integration and scaling new capabilities. Can you spend a few moments telling us your perspective on the importance of change management in your career?
Yeah, sure, I can. I mean, it's a topic, it's very near and dear to me. So when I started my career, change management wasn't even a topic. And when we used to, do our big software installation, we'd install the software. If people used it, great. And if they didn't, well, next renewal, then you try and make sure that people are using it. As we moved to the cloud, that changed the dimensions a little bit in that you really wanted to make sure that people were using the solutions that you were providing them. Now, we always should have done that, but it just took a while for that to evolve. And certainly, we built out an adoption and change management practice where now it's just embedded in the culture at Microsoft, which is great to see. But we had a practice that focuses with our customers and in helping them understand the importance of having the right change management plan, which includes the communications and the stakeholders and how are you going to support this. And it's not just the people aspect, it's also the technology and infrastructure aspect. So super important. And sometimes it takes a while to educate customers, or it did. We've evolved from there. But it did take time to educate them on the importance and why they wanted to actually spend their time and investment to build out those plans and make sure that we implemented those plans. Because otherwise, you don't have customer success. They're not using the solutions. They don't know how to manage the training of their people, all of that good stuff that makes them successful.
There's stats out here about how many new integrations actually are built on top of poorly integrated previous versions of it. They adopt some of the new stuff, and you got this quasi world that you were referencing that just doesn't really embrace what the company has invested in them to do. But when you really, from the leadership down, go, nope, we're not going to get out of this acquisition or this contracting phase unless we adopt our adoption and change management playbook to make sure that people really understand from the top down, like, no, we want to make sure everybody knows what's the comms plan, that there's 2 in a box. It says, people on both sides of the transaction or the client and the delivery arm, and all those mechanisms are figured out. And in that realm, that's where success comes from. And you had just referenced it, that you don't have customer success or their job is really difficult if you don't do this investment in adoption and change management.
Yep, totally. And, it was really exciting to witness it go from infancy. And certainly there are people that were spearheading this in Microsoft, far before me, that continued to, pound the drum until it started to get some traction. And then even working with the sales folks, getting them to understand the importance of it and why we were including this particular capability in the bids when they wanted to take something out. Oh, we'll take this out, right? Well, two key things. We'll take out the change management and we'll take out the project management. We're like,
how many times have we heard that? Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah. So they kind of go hand in hand, those, the engagement / project management and making sure you have that change management plan and that people have bought into it, both within your organization, so our collective team, but also at the customer. Super important that you have from the top down, you have the backing of the leadership.
Excellent. Diana, that last point is pretty important. If both sides of the equation understand, no, this is not just a revenue grab. This is best practice for your long-term investment. If both sides of the transaction realize that, that's a much healthier environment to be in, and then everybody else falls in line and supports it.
Yeah, and again, you need that whether you're acquiring something or you're building it, internally for your own solutions. And even if you're using a partner, you always need engagement/project management, change management for the people as well as for the infrastructure.
Diana, as we move into the phases where we're going to scale an operation or delivery capabilities, how do you look at the structure of how those teams are put together and what's really important from your vantage point?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mark. Certainly, whether it differs slightly if you have an acquisition team coming in. You already have a makeup of a team. You need to figure out again, do you have enough of those skills? Do you need to build out those skills in the broader ecosystem? And I know you spent some time with Laura Longcore on another episode talking about scaling.
Yeah.
It's a big topic, right? How do you actually get that capability scaled out into the broader organization? And what kind of skills do you need? Do you need architect skills? Do you need consultant skills? Do you need project management skills? And what do you need to do across all those different paradigms to make sure that you're successful? If you're building out your own capabilities, it's not completely different because you need to think about again, what are the skills that I need to build? How many of them do I need? What's the size of the team? And then when you're incubating, you may start small because maybe you don't have the sales to support a larger team. And I think that's a critical component. When does that shift, right? When do you have enough sales of whatever capability that you're trying to scale? When do you have enough sales to support a bigger delivery organization? It's a little bit like the chicken and the egg, but that's super important to work on and try and figure out. And that's why you need to be really close with your sales organization in the planning for both sides of the equation.
Worked together for 35 years. So we've been all over how that whole area of customer success has evolved. Any characteristics that you've picked up that really are the hallmarks of being world class when you think about customer success?
So customer always has to be front of mind, right? And there's a lot of difficult customers for sure. I mean, you and I've seen them. But when you think about customer success, it's how well are they able to leverage the solutions you've provided to get them the business outcomes that you have defined for them at the beginning. So also very important that you know what your end goal is. For true customer success, you need to make sure you understand what is it that they're trying to achieve for their business goals. Where's the value, right? Because at the end of the day, you have a board of directors or you have senior leadership within that company that's looking at making a big investment with you to get them a solution that's going to solve a business problem and give them a good return on their investment. So being able to bring all of that together is very important.
You see a company being sales oriented, they're engineering delivery oriented, they're customer success oriented. But my point being that when you're one of the first two, that really isn't aligned ultimately with customers' long-term outcomes that they want. And it's that function of customer success actually sits in that vortex that really helps make that happen. They've got the ear of the customer. They understand what the goals are. They're empathetic and they're proactive in speaking and working with their counterparts in delivery and the other functional areas. Do you find that as well as you've gone through your career and you look back at these things?
Yeah, so certainly having the integration of the team between selling, delivering, reporting, and obviously the product group as well. Like, you need everybody to be aligned together, especially when you're dealing with these very, very large Fortune 500 companies that are investing millions of dollars with you. They're relying on you to support everything that they do or their business critical applications. And so the more alignment you have between what you sell, what you're going to deliver, how you're going to support it, and what does success look like, and having everybody understand what does that mean and what does that look like, very critical to success in the end.
You had referenced big, massive enterprises. And the thought that hit me was that even though if you look at it on paper, the resources that an emerging company has are far less than the big dogs, if you will. But sometimes their orientation is so customer centric, they have a richer customer success mentality. And, you wouldn't think about that on paper, but they're just so attuned to the outcome that the client really signed up for. And they're going to do everything in their power to make it happen. And I think somewhere in there is the magic sauce that helps um, entrepreneurial emerging companies really succeed.
I always say you have to be curious and learn from others. And so, as we would get new employees in that would come from companies that were very customer centric, how do you learn from those individuals? How do you take new best practices? How do you make sure it's not invented here kind of paradigm doesn't creep in? And how do you instill that into all the individuals in your organization? The importance of making sure you're looking after the customer, ensuring their success. How do you get that alignment all the way across? It can be a challenge for sure, but I think that the outcomes from that we saw were very beneficial.
Oh, that's outstanding. Conversely, I wouldn't be happy with an episode that we didn't talk about Ted Lasso. Be
Ah,
curious, not judgmental. So that just works. We
uh,
should get a tattoo for that. Diana, this is a really fun section. I like to refer to it as the Wayback Machine. It's where we ask guests if they had a chance to crawl in that proverbial Wayback Machine and go back in time to a younger version of themselves. What type of advice or what words of wisdom might you give yourself earlier in your career that would help them on the road ahead?
I had a tremendous time throughout 43 years working in tech, and I did everything from data entry all the way through to running large teams at Microsoft. So it was a spectacular opportunity. I lived overseas. I did things that I never thought I could do. So I tell people dream big. Don't be afraid because you're not going to know everything, but don't be afraid to try. And most important, be curious, like learn. You're going to learn something new, learn something every day. Be curious and ask questions and ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I found one of the key things when I integrated into Microsoft was networking. Network, network, network. I lived in Boston at the time and I would go out to Seattle for meetings or whatnot. Every time I went, I'd try and have coffee with 3 or 4 or 5 or however many people I could just to find out what they did and to learn something. And so just take yourself out of yourself, so to speak, and let yourself absorb what other people do and just don't hold back. I believe everyone can achieve things greater than what they believe. And I certainly was an example of that.
Yeah, what fantastic advice. For our audience, Diana and I are both from Peoria, Illinois, which the center of the universe as far as we're concerned.
Yeah, I'm going back for my big 5-0 high school reunion next year. So I'll be having a Avani's gondola and probably some Agatushi pizza.
Oh gosh, Diane, I'm hungry. I'm hungry. That's all good stuff. But your wisdom about people younger in life, I rolled onto your team in the late '80s. I've loved every second of it, from being on your team when we were earlier in our careers to evolving to being friends and colleagues and in all different types of capacities. And what you just shared is to the point. That's always been Diana.
Yeah, just
Totally approachable, willing to speak with others and network and some more.
what I found very beneficial as millennials and next gen, employees were coming in, I actually took them as a mentor. I would have a young new person be my mentor so that I could learn. Again, it goes back to being curious and learning because it's a different workforce than, what I grew up with and what I've managed. And you have to understand how to manage very diverse workforces successfully because it's important because everybody has a role and you miss out if you don't do that. So that's another piece of advice I would give not the young generation so much as the more mature generation, shall I call it.
Gosh, that you're the first guest who's talked in that orientation, from the middle career, looking back and trying to adopt and get smarter about the youth. It's a symbiotic relationship. There's a lot of wisdom that can be passed in both
Uh,
directions.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
they communicate different, they learn different, and it's all good, right? And you don't wanna try and force that square peg into the round hole. You wanna actually make it co-join it, so to speak,
Yeah.
right?
I'm laughing because my children, they get so angry with me because for years I would just blurt out the word. And I never knew exactly how you were supposed to say word up or whatever the kid said. So I'd look for spots to say it. Totally inappropriate word. And they would be like, Dad, shut up, you dork,
Yeah,
whatever. So good humor also helps. And
that's right.
takes us a lot.
Always have a sense of humor, right? That's the
Yeah.
other thing.
Yeah. You know what? That is, I wish more people would say that. Yes, we're serious about what we do, but if you have a lighthearted nature to you, other people can approach you and put you in a spot where you can ask others for help and advice and guidance if the mood is
Yeah, and
toned like
I
that.
always had one mantra with people. I'd say, 2 ears, 1 mouth, or sometimes 2 ears, no mouth. Just listen, right? Don't assume you know what someone's going to say or what the problem is. Just listen. And that goes across if you're selling, you're delivering, you're, whatever you're doing, and even in life, and I try and remind myself of that now that I'm out of the workforce and retired. Um, Still try to say do that.
Yeah. Uh, hey, well, at least the effort's there, and I can
That's right.
attest that it's been there the whole time. Diana, that's wonderful humor, great advice all the way through. Wonderful seeing you. Speak again soon.
Great seeing you too, Mark. Take care.